Yesterday was an EDay, and I actually got some EDays. Um, so an EDay, of course, is a day where there's no pressure for anything. You just exist. Ideally, you'd be existing with nature. You'd be taking in the moment. I'm working on that. I tend to just watch TV or something. In any case, I think I had two ideas that are whatever. We're gonna pursue them, whether or not they're worth it. Um, And the thing is, right now I have to go to the library and stuff before it closes. So I can't really develop it right now, but I've been trying to catch it all day. The idea that I had in my E-Day yesterday, where I spent a lot of time, in bed, so I was half asleep, kind of. But all right, here we go. Ready? So, ReconcilIT, the two sides, and then actually this other idea maybe is more from today. And the other thing is, it's a concrete step. It isn't much of an idea. It's actually just a concrete step. Other people have had the idea. But you force yourself to find another possible explanation. All right, so let's do the second one first, really quickly. As Fred talks about aliens, and he talks about all the scientific proof that aliens visited and built the pyramids, and the humans couldn't have done it. Okay, I hear all your numbers or whatever, and we can maybe look at those, see which of those numbers are actually true, and then also see whether those numbers actually indicate the conclusion that you are putting forward. But he's just so gosh darn certain. Just keeps saying it's proof and stuff. By the way, both of these kinds of interactions have to be completely voluntary. So the second thing that I'm thinking is that basically, suppose he says, I believe that extraterrestrial intelligence came and did yada yada yada, because primitive humans couldn't have done it. Okay, we've got that, and we know that you think there's a whole lot of evidence to support it. We also know that as human brains, what we're really good at is justifying whatever sings. So whatever feels right, we're really good at justifying it. Well or not, but feeling like it's justified. So we're really good at aging. That's what aging is. It's when all those its are all those its that just like immediately start giving forth sort of evidence or whatever for the thing that you believe to be true. And we don't want to maj. We don't want to be given a whole bunch of bullshit justification. But we know that we're human brains, and we know that we don't have a very good standard for justification. And we know that these its are going to deliver justifications whether or not the justifications are good. We know that aging is what follows from a belief either being challenged or contended or even asked about, interrogated. So, knowing we have a whole age system, well, there's no point in just running it every time and it's just delivering every time, and the age system delivering every time, because we know we can't trust it, right? Maybe I should write on the screen. One thing we know. We know that the its that constitute us, that constitute what seems right, what feels right, what seems true, what sings, we know that those were not designed to actually find real truth. So we know that they're not reliable for a lot of the big questions that we ask them. That's number one. Number two, we know that whatever they do come up with, there are other its, the age its, that whatever belief is put on the table, there's a department that just goes, all right, here's a bunch of evidence for it. And just like we know that the first its aren't particularly reliable, we also know that the justifying its aren't particularly reliable. We did not actually evolve to have a perfect standard of logic and reason and empiricism and apply that to everything that comes out. No, we know from evolution, we know from how minds change, that we evolved to basically demonstrate our point, and then the community together is supposed to try to find sort of the truth. Individually, we're not really, that's not sort of the idea. And that truth that the community is supposed to find is really a hunter-gatherer truth anyway. But then again, we do have some capacities to learn. Okay. So one, we know that the base its that produce the original conclusion are not reliable. Two, we know once a conclusion is produced, there's a whole bunch of its that are going to come in with a whole bunch of premises that are going to feel right. And that system isn't reliable. And then the third thing we know is that there are certain predictable and untrue conclusions or tendencies that our it systems have, whether that be the agits or the original its that came up with the conclusion. What did I just say? Oh yeah, so there's some predictability in it. So then here's what you do. You have a belief. Unless you have absolutely unless you just have absolutely no self-confidence, or unless you or if you have a good deal of humility, we can probably trust that you're going to have a bunch of premises that support this conclusion. But we know that the human brain does not take premises, evaluate premises, and go to the conclusion. It typically goes to the conclusion, and then when it needs to justify, it creates premises. Because we know that the brain evolved to save energy, and we know that that's more economic, and we know that that's what we see when we talk to people. Okay. So, no sense in us going down the whole rabbit hole of iraging like a bunch of times, right? So you present a statement. You give us your aj. Maybe it's a maj, maybe it isn't. You are volunteering for this process. This is a voluntary process. So you, knowing your human brain, having critical recognition, are happy to say, this conclusion, don't really know what it comes from. I know I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here that I'm ready to tell you that will support it. I know that I believe this thing to be true. I know that it but maybe it isn't true. Okay. So because thankfully, the brains are pretty much all the same. So there's a lot of predictability to what its will produce. So regardless of what all your supposed premises are, what is another possible path to that conclusion using the its that we've already identified? And this is really where the voluntary part is so important. And this is the step that I feel like I could make with Fred, but it wouldn't be easy. I would need him first to verbally commit to being open-minded, to not fully trusting himself or the scientist, right? Because he doesn't trust scientists, except for the scientists that say that religion is wrong and that aliens came to Earth. But any scientists that say religion is right, or that no, we don't have any evidence that aliens built the pyramids, that's not a necessary conclusion. Those he does not believe. So I gotta get him to say something out loud about that. I also have to get him to acknowledge those three things that we talked about. Its are unreliable, the agits are unreliable, and there are predictable ways that we arrive at certain false conclusions. Okay. So anyway, then it's about brainstorming. It has to be Fred that says this. It has to be Fred that wants to know, hey Eris, why else is this singing so hard in me right now? Why am I so sure that this is true if it isn't the evidence? Maybe it's the evidence. Maybe I'm being a reasonable interpreter of the evidence and I found a true conclusion. But just in case I'm actually a human brain who is programmed to believe in a God, just like pretty much all humans, but had some really bad experiences with the church when I was an adolescent. And so I've even told you the story of how I rejected the adult world and the church. So knowing that, what are some mechanisms that could have gotten me to the belief in a sort of all-knowing, all-powerful extraterrestrial intelligence that could be replacing, since I didn't want to believe in the Catholic God, they could have been replacing that. Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked, Fred. And, Austin, I asked you to pick up that book for me, Believing Brains. So this time, we're going to look at some pages. No, you mustn't be stern. So, Fred, you're really curious then about sort of how the brain could come to believe that specific thing, how it could get there without using evidence? What are some of the its that we have that do go there? You want to know about those? You really mean that? Okay, because listen, I'm not telling you that you're wrong about the extraterrestrial, blah, blah, blah. I listen to you every time. And it's so important to me to be open-minded. So I love playing with this idea. And it's absolutely possible that in if the Earth is still around, Homo sapiens is still around in several thousand generations, that we could go to a planet where there's some primitive life, that we might construct something, and maybe that we want to wait until they have a certain intelligence to, and then once they understand the clues that we've left behind, then they'll be able to reach out to us. Absolutely, that's a possible thing in the history and future of the universe, and it's possible in the future. Well, that means it's possible in the history because other, beings have had different timelines than us. So, Fred, absolutely, bro. And some of those numbers, those are singing for me. That's so weird. What a coincidence. That can't be a coincidence. Hey, Fred, I hear you, bro. But I can't really engage with it unless I also hear you say, hey, Michael Shermer ain't nobody. Neuroscience ain't nothing. And so if people have found networks that lead to convictions like mine without actually needing evidence, if the human brain is capable of thinking that it has evidence, of being able to list numbers and words and make sentences and stuff, and believe that those are evidence, and those actually not be evidence, then I need to know about that. That's what I need to hear you say, Fred. Then, once we have the fucking two possibilities on the table, and once we're not like, this is the only possibility, and once you're volunteering to explore the two, knowing that we may not figure out the answer, because maybe it is some giant conspiracy. Maybe Shermer's a part of some giant conspiracy. Maybe he's working for the aliens to, for some reason, hide their existence because they think that humans aren't ready. Or maybe Shermer doesn't want all humans to know. It's only supposed to be us special ones who see through the bullshit that get it. Okay, great. But also, what if Shermer isn't full of shit, and what if we are? Alright. So, basically, sorry. The point is that if you're serious about being open, or if you're serious about knowing truth, that's not just something that some of your its say, but other its do not act that way at all. Or a significant amount of its don't at all match that sentiment of that one, that sentiment, that one it that's like, yo, yeah, truth, bro. And all the other its are like, no, 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 let's Aj, bro. What we have is truth, bro. Anyway, I don't remember how I said that sentence, but if that's important to actually have truth, then you have to take a belief that you have. Go ahead, feel free. It's gonna be queued up anyway. So Aj a little bit, write down your justifications. Okay. Get that out of your system. Feel good about that. Feel like this is a real serious possibility. No, can't nobody laugh at me for this. Okay, great. Then once you feel really safe in having established that, once you really reminded yourself of how important the truth is, find out how you could have gotten there without evidence, just in case, just to check. It's just fucking something worth knowing. And I like how I phrased it when I was talking to Fred and a friend of his, because we're gonna be a team. We're gonna save the world. And I love how I phrased, like, you have this truth, whatever, okay. Psychology recently has been saying that the mind's mechanisms are not as reliable as they seem. That is worth investigating. Anybody who takes their own thoughts seriously, that is worth investigating. What'd you say, Kahneman? System 1, System 2, evolution. What Eris? Always different. It's that is, no matter what you believe, no matter what belief you want to maintain, it is fucking worth investigating that your belief maintaining system, your belief finding system, your belief believing system, your belief, did I say maintaining system, feels super reliable, and evidence suggests it is less reliable than it feels. How can you move forward with any idea without being like, because up until now, something feels right. You think you can give evidence. There's no alarms going off. You're like, this is right. It has to be worth it to learn that alarm system isn't actually calibrated as well as we might assume that it is. It doesn't go off every time we have a stupid idea. Our good idea system of like, oh hey, that's a good idea, doesn't go off every time we hear a good idea. And sometimes, and this is only for the really brave-hearted, sometimes it goes off when we have a bad idea, or an idea unuseful or counterproductive even, or far from the truth. And that's okay to have those ideas, but just know that they might slip under the radar. And that is worth fucking investigating. How does my radar function? How do my alarms function? How do I believe? How do I know that something is true? It is fucking worth investigating. So stop telling me about all these things that you believe to be true and why you think that they're true. As far as like the exterior evidence, I want to know about in there. And you don't know. You don't really have access. So together, we're going to have to look at some psychology research and figure out how might you have gotten to that idea. Let's do an alternative voice map. We'll do a voice map, a rational voice map. Oh, look, there's these premises, and then they lead to this conclusion. Okay, I got you. Cool. Now, let's do a psychological voice map. A psychological IT map. What are the possible interpretive mechanisms and tendencies that could have led to that? All right, great. So we've gone over that enough. That's a lot of fun, I think. My its, we're saying that's a cool idea. It might not be. We have to sit down, and I want you to sit down with me. Write down some of the sentences I'm saying. Let's define some terms and blah, blah, blah. And see whether, let me Aj, Let me give you the reasons I think that this thing is true. But then I'm going to be ready. I mean, I'm ready right now. I don't even ask to Aj. If you're ready, I'm ready. We can just how can a brain go from, let's say, my experiences and my preferences and my whatever goals exist in here, to the belief that, for instance, souls don't exist, consciousness isn't real, rationality is biologically impossible, to have a pre-programmed treatment of every piece of information, and I am just the sum of a whole bunch of if-then neural networks for pre-programmed treatment, and then also the capacity for them to change, based on experience. How did I get that? Tell me, is there an it in the brain? Is there a tendency we've observed in psychology, that a resistance to the idea of the soul, maybe? Or maybe it's just autistic or ADHD people, right? Because most people seem completely addicted and committed to the idea of a soul. For some reason, I reject it. And I have been. My whole life, basically. Free will, I was like, what are you guys talking about? So, what is that? If it isn't evidence, if it isn't reason, what it have we identified in human psychology that could explain that? And we look at that. You tell me. Nothing comes to mind right now, but it's not even like I was able to check things. I think my system doesn't want to come up with anything, but I am open to hearing something. And there are its in here that want to do it. It's just that the its that would come up with the ideas, they're like turning their backs. Okay. Second thing. Can't believe. Thanks for. Well, I mean, it's silly anyone who's not watching this. This is good stuff, but I just think a lot of people are silly. So. Okay, second thing. Remember those things that we established earlier? We know that we are just a bunch of hundreds of thousands of its, of if-then mechanisms interacting with each other, and they have some hierarchy and stuff. If we know that, it stands to reason that based on the way evolution works as well, based on that and the way that evolution works and the accidentalness of it, that there are probably a lot of its that are in conflict. In fact, we also know that that's advantageous, right? To have its that are in conflict, right? To have an it that interprets blank X a certain way, and then another it that interprets X a different way. Now you got maybe double the chance of actually interpreting X correctly. We know that neurons excite and inhibit other neurons, right? So we know that there's competition, sort of, or, it's not just a positive feedback loop where every first thing, boom. Unfortunately, when you have to defend yourself or you feel challenged for your ideas, then you do have a positive feedback loop. You have an idea, it comes up with justification for it. And once there's that justification, other its come up to justify that justification and to give more justifications for the initial thing. But, when you're chill, the great thing about the human mind is that it's able to compete with itself. It's able to go, oh, maybe this. It's able to go, oh, but if this, then not that, while another guy's going, if this, then that. And then there's a sum that's done. So this excites the neuron a little bit, this inhibits the neuron a little bit, and then we'll see whether the threshold is broken or met, and then, the neuron they both fired upon will fire. Or the it that the two its spoke to. Okay. So we know that there has to be competition and so on. Okay. So then it's guaranteed. Gosh, is it confusing? It's a question of emphasis, though, isn't it? Oh boy, but I really like it though. So I really like it. I I really like that. Oh, and also information technology. I really want to keep saying it, but maybe I have to pronounce it like with a French accent, eat or something like that. I don't know. But I think obviously it's confusing for you, but I do think that it does become clear when I'm saying the pronoun it to refer to something I've said, and when I'm talking about capital IT, if then mechanisms. All right. By the way, all mechanisms are if then mechanisms. All right. So if we suppose that there's a whole bunch of these it's that are sometimes in conflict, then we can also suppose no, then we can just go find some. And this has to be voluntary, of course. It can't work. The person will massage too easily if it's like someone interrogating them. But if you have two people and so let's say I'm with Fred and I say, hey Fred, let's try to find. I know that there are thousands of conflicting it's here, and sometimes that's a good thing. But sometimes they'll be like so directly oppositional. And if you don't, and I don't, and because I don't know it, maybe they do need some reconciliation, or one of them does need to go. So let's go find two it's that in my mind that oppose each other, and then maybe, for instance, it's hard to find them in yourself, but for Fred, maybe we could say there's definitely some belief it's that are in conflict. Here are two pairs that come to mind. One, I mentioned science, his relationship to science, scientific proof, quote unquote, which I tried to tell him that P word is a swear word. Stop saying that. But scientific proof matters and has weight in conversations sometimes, but not other times. So maybe we could find a way to formulate those two things such that we see an opposition there. Now, sometimes it should. I mean, it's not like you're saying. I'm saying that if you believe in one experiment, you have to believe in the results of every single experiment. I'm not saying that. Or at least I'm not trying not to. Or maybe I've just revealed two opposing it's in my mind. I don't know. The authority of scientists has weight in conversation. Other times he says, generally speaking, the authority of scientists cannot be trusted because of all these conspiracies. I feel like there's some contradiction there. And if the person can see that and follow that and say, well, if I have to give up then one of these, or if I have to add more detail to them both such that they are no longer in conflict, so I say that authority of science is good in these cases, and the authority of science is not good in these cases, that would be productive. If you can't, you will think that you'll be able to, which is why it has to be a voluntary, humble thing. Because if it's one person trying to show another person, the person will not see it. The person will be like, oh no, just rephrase it this way, and they're not in conflict. And you'll be like, I think they may still be in conflict. And no, and then words will come out, and it'll just, you waste your time. It has to be someone who wants to find possible conflict. Or not just someone, but in that situation, they have to be wanting to find possible conflict. Anyway, so this is called a ReconcilIT therapy. You've got a few different options. One, you clarify the it's such that they're no longer in conflict. Now, if you do that, by the way, by writing on paper new versions of the it's, that doesn't mean that the rewiring of the it's happened. Let's suppose that you correctly articulated the two opposing it's. You were able to somehow put words to the mechanisms. If there is scientific evidence for this, then I validate it. And I've got another it. If there's scientific evidence for this, that does not have much weight. Those are in opposition. Those, I think, are correct articulations of its that exist in Fred's mind in different places, and so with different conditions. So now we have to try to add detail. If we were to do it correctly, the real, well, oh, that doesn't work anymore because it used to be the voice. Oh, no, the vrai, the real attribution, the it to which we can really attribute the delivery. What I would suppose is, if scientists agree with me, then scientific authority is valuable. That's how you could rephrase one of them. And the other one is, if scientists disagree with me, then scientific authority needs to be scrutinized or doesn't carry much weight. Now those two things are no longer in conflict. That's cool. I think that they would both be, based on my interpretation of Fred, would both be accurate articulations of the its that I've seen deliver. And clearly, once you have those two in front of you, and if you're, interested, that's interesting. And you know what? Throw on the table. I know, Fred, that you have an it that's like, I shouldn't judge evidence based on whether it seems right to me, sort of, whether it matches my conclusion or not, or whatever, however you want to phrase that. That it is in there too. So that's opposed. That now you found a really cool opposition. So put away the one, if they agree with me, then I trust scientists. Let's just put that aside for a second. Let's look at that one. If they don't agree with me, then I don't trust them. And let's look at this other it that you have. I don't want to base my trust on scientists on whether or not I found the same conclusion, especially since I'm not doing the work. Oh, look, that's an interesting conflict. One of these has got to go. So am I going to give up my commitment to impartiality, or am I going to have to try to give up my commitment to maintenance? All right, well, look, every human brain is programmed with this maintenance thing. So even if you go, oh shit, I don't want that, that's not going to just remove it from its system, from your system, from you. But what you can do is, anytime that appears in your aging, in your justification of your belief, anything that has to do with questioning the authority of scientists, you got to put a little star by it. Remember that that's one of the its we decided we didn't really want to encourage or keep. We checked to make sure that the it in your premises is the same it that we just articulated, and that you don't want, which is the it that bases the trust on whether or not the conclusion is the same. And that's why it's good that we, at some point in this process, I think, had listed out the supposed premises. Or you can just, whatever the person says, you can just be jotting them down. And Fred says a lot. Scientific proof for blank, and says a lot like, yeah, but we don't know everything. That's just a theory for other stuff. Like evolution, for instance, being just a theory. Whereas scientifically proven that extraterrestrials came. Well, no, he doesn't refer to all of evolution as just a theory, but when he always tells me, we don't know where the human intelligence came from, where the brain came from, how humans went like this and all of a sudden had intelligence. First of all, they didn't. That never happened. We just are starting to have a little bit of intelligence. Us and a couple other species, and yeah, we're further ahead than the other species, but there's a long way to go. We don't have intelligence. And then also evolution. Environment change. I mean, evolution, bro. Natural selection, bro. And he goes, that's just a theory. Okay. So I think we've covered what we want to cover. I don't even know how I'm going to be able to charge it. So I have to just go later and charge this battery. Huh? Too long now. Okay. we're not done. I mean, I don't have, we are, but I've covered the main topics, but I haven't covered them. We are done with the first thing that we talked about, which is the second in our first list. And we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes or so ReconcilIT, where you try to reconcile. And then here's something that I had said. I had pointed out that even if you find a maladaptive it, or one that isn't adapted to this question or this conversation, once you find that, let's say you found the real one, the real thing that led to your delivery, and you're like, oh shit, this vat is a mala. Hold on to that acknowledgement that exists in the system, and do not believe that acknowledgement causes it to disappear or change. Now you will want to maybe change. So you've written down this 8, you're like, that's a mala. But it would be less of a mala. It would be a little bit better adapted to this question, or to questions, this kind of question, if I tweak it like this. You have now written a new it. Do not suppose that by writing it you have installed it. And do not suppose that by writing this new it you have replaced the old it. But that is kind of the idea, to try to install the new it through practice and some other things that you and I haven't come up with yet, such that it, through heavy learning, becomes stronger than the original it, the vat that for your delivery. And there you go. So that's just a couple of warnings. So concretely, just to finish off, what we've said, first of all, pen and paper. Second of all, we know I am it selected by nature. I am a shitty natural intelligence. My it selected by nature have backup. Whenever they come up with an idea, this shitty natural intelligence, or this certainly not amazing natural intelligence, impressive relatively speaking, but come on, they've got backup. You want to believe in conspiracies? Oh, there are conspiracies in here, bro. You want to talk about being manipulated, being lied to, bro? You've got whole departments whose job in here is to just weave a coherent story regardless of what the information is. You've got departments that are literally changing the photon information that's arriving. We read it in This Explains Everything in the Wizard of I chapter. So go to the This Explains Everything Mind chapter. Go to the Wizard of I video on that. So you're telling me, as I scan a room, as I do these eye saccades, because it would be overwhelming and dizzying to my system to be processing the blurry information as my eyes move from one spot to the next, you're telling me that there are its that are literally inventing based on the thing that I was looking at and the thing that I expect to be looking at, and other stuff that when I have focus here, and here, it's just creating an image. Whereas in reality, the eyes, the image signals being sent by the eyes are being stopped before they even get to the brain. We evolved so to the eye, when it's moving from one point to the other quickly, does not send information to the brain. Do you understand what I'm saying right now? When I do that, I experience no blackness, no gap in time. I felt like I am moving my eyes and seeing the things along the way. But information wasn't being sent from my eyes to the rest of me. Do you understand? There are images as I'm doing this that are 100% coming from here and not from there. What were we talking about? What was the point? I mean, that's huge, right? The Wizard of I, Gerald Ford. No, I don't remember what his name was. I think there was a G involved. The Wizard of I with a capital I. Right? Obviously, it's meant as a double entendre. Oh, yeah. So you want to talk to me about conspiracies and manipulations and interest and competing interest and the lack of transparency? Yep. Yep. That's happening. Yep. Yep. On every level. You've got you introspection you can't even do. The its that would want to like investigate. If you had an IA, if you wanted to be like, hey, I need to do some introspection, need to question myself, need to wonder why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Impossible. Except for by studying psychology, but it's possible from just looking inside. Impossible. In fact, Steven Pinker, no, not Steven Pinker, David McRaney in You Are Not So Smart talks about, in his introspection chapter, 2 experiments. One in which people were walk into a room and they can take any painting on the wall. And then a year later, the experimenters call them up. What do you think of your painting? How do you like it? Now, here's the difference. One group, before choosing a painting, was asked to just explain why they wanted it, what they liked about it. The other group was not. The group who, and you know, there's no competition. Now, were there some its as they were explaining their choices that were judging their own choices and whatever? Sure. And that's something I've been wondering about, how they controlled for that in the experiment. But in any case, listen. They, the people who were asked to explain their choices, who were asked to do some introspection, think about why this painting is something that they want, to justify based on their knowledge of self, the painting, they didn't like their painting after a year later. Those people who had been like, yeah, I like it because of this, I like it because of that. Oh, I remember the second experiment, so I'm so excited. Okay. Okay. All right. Fuck. All right, hold on. This is exciting. This is really exciting. All right. I knew it was chapter 8 too. And literally, I was about to say it out loud. But that's not hindsight bias. I promise you. It's as sure as I'm recording right now. Well, it's because I just looked at it, so it's not like magical that I knew. Okay. This is great. All right, let's page 65. You Are Not So Smart, David McRaney. We haven't yet done a video, a video where we act this one out. Okay, I'm going to start reading here. The second group, the ones who had to write out why they were choosing one over the others, hated theirs. The first group, the grab-and-go people, usually picked a nice, fancy painting. The second group, the ones who had to explain their choice, usually picked an inspirational poster with a cat clinging to a rope. According to Wilson, when you are faced with a decision in which you are forced to think about your rationale, you start to turn the volume in your emotional brain down and the volume in your logical brain up. I'm not going to bother rephrasing that. It's wrong, of course, but hey, fun exercise. Comment below how you think I would prefer that to be phrased. You start creating a mental list of pros and cons that would never have been conjured up if you had gone with your gut. As Wilson noted in his research, forming preferences is akin to riding a bicycle. We can do it easily, but cannot easily explain how. Before Wilson's work, the general consensus was to see careful deliberation is good, but he showed how the act of introspection can sometimes lead you to make decisions that look good on virtual paper, but leave you emotionally lacking. Wilson knew previous research at Kent State had shown that ruminations about your own depression tend to make you more depressed, but distraction leads to an improved mood. Hold on, let me move ahead. Now let's talk about... No, that was the poster test. Page 66. Wilson conducted another experiment in which people were shown two small photos of different people and were asked which... Because I read a translation of this to Fred the other day. Is this what I wanted? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah, Wilson conducted another experiment in which people were shown two small photos of two different people and were asked which one was more attractive. They were then handed what they were told was a larger version of the photo they'd picked, but it was actually a picture of a completely different person. They were then asked why they'd chosen it. Each time, the person dutifully spun a yarn explaining his or her choice. The person had never seen this photo before, but that didn't make the task of explaining why he or she had preferred it in an imaginary past any more difficult. You should feel like everything's crumbling around you. So talking about government conspiracy, science conspiracies, and so on, is worthwhile because there are small groups of people that don't have the community's interest at heart and that have the power to serve their own interest. Okay, sure. But before you talk about that, we need to be talking about these conspiracies. Now, to justify what I've just said, let me, because conspiracy theorists, they often, let's say, if I talk about something that scientists have come up with, or that scientists don't really subscribe to, people are going to say, oh no, but that information is sort of invalidated by the fact that we can't actually trust those sources. Lobbyists and economic interests, big pharma, blah, blah, blah. So, if the possibility, and if you're believing that these conspiracies exist, invalidates a great deal of knowledge, and flat earthers, that's their whole thing, right? Even creationists, I guess they must think it's some kind of a conspiracy, right? Anyway, I don't know what they think, but so sorry, I lost my train of thought. Hold on, I have to pee. We're almost done. Right. You know where I'm going with this. So if you're writing off all that information about like vaccines, oh, there's this, that's a good one. All these doctors saying vaccines, conspiracy, whatever. Okay. So if there's evidence of conspiratorial activity, and I don't really know whether you have evidence, but you believe you have evidence. So if there is evidence of conspiratorial activity, that undermines the validity of the information produced by these conspiratorial entities, right? Okay. So if we want to try to put all of this together, then here's how we're going to do it. I'm looking for the Wizard of I right now. Here's how we're going to do it. There are conspiracies in your mind. Very untrustworthy things that don't have sort of truth and morality as their goals. That evolved just to watch your own ass. These mechanisms can't be trusted. So, what do? Two things you do. One, you try to find internal conflict. Because maybe one of the mechanisms is right. But let's find out if its contradiction is also in there and is also delivering. And then let's get them together. It's like you're looking at a police department. Let's find a good cop. And let's find a cop who is sort of the opposite of this guy. Oh, those cops are having trouble in that department. This guy's sometimes trying to be on the take. And this guy's trying to clean shit up. Okay, we found us a pair. Let's figure out what we want for the department, which one of these styles. And let's try to get them interacting, competing. Okay. The other thing you do with the conspiracies in there is you imagine what might the conspiracy be? So suppose, okay, so let's talk about this metaphorically. Okay, so my sITstem seems pretty convinced that the Earth is round, and it's getting that information from these photos, and it thinks it has all of these evidence. It thinks that every time you go to a higher point, you can see more things, and that demonstrates the curvature of the Earth. Okay, blah, 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 blah. All that ajing aside, we'll write it down, but let's put that aside for a second. Now, how could a human brain go to the belief that the Earth is round while being wrong? What are some its that we've already identified? Some predictable irrationality, as Dan R. Riley says. Dan? Yeah. Dan? Yeah. What are some voice maps, some paths that a human brain, a human sITstem could take to get there, and then it's just coming up with those images and numbers after the fact? Because maybe it's a conspiracy. The moon landing, those images and all of that stuff. Maybe that's a conspiracy. So if we can't trust the evidence, then what's another way? How else can we explain how the mind got there? When we were evolving, we always assumed that large things were round because that was a good, productive, advantageous assumption to make when you couldn't see a whole object. Something like that. We didn't evolve that way. It was not necessary for us to understand the shape of the Earth, but that's great. Brilliant. We've done it. Brilliant. That's brilliant. Is that not? Am I wrong? I think that's fantastic. Yeah, how to deal with the conspiracies of the mind. Did I not put a star by the Wizard of I? That would be pretty crazy, right? Gerald Smallberg. As a reward for having watched this whole thing, for the last 6 minutes, we're just going to read this. You don't have to go click over to the other video. The Wizard of I by Gerald Smallberg. Practicing neurologist, playwright, off-Broadway productions, charter members The Gold Ring. Consciousness is the fusion of immediate stimuli with memory that combines the simultaneous feeling of being both the observer and the observed into a smooth, enveloping flow of time that is neither truly the past nor the present, but somehow inexplicably each of them. It is the ultimate authority and arbiter of our perceptual reality. That consciousness is still an intractable problem for scientists and philosophers to understand is not surprising. Whatever the final answer turns out to be, I suspect it will be an illusion the mind evolved to hide the messy workings of its parallel modular computing. Neurophysiologists are finding, as they pull ever so slightly at the veil that shrouds the Wizard of I, that this indispensable, attentive, and observant self-monitor called consciousness is dependent on a trick in overseeing our perceptions. Our subjective sense of time does not correspond to reality. Cortical evoked potentials, electrical recordings of the normal brain during routine activity have been shown to precede by almost a third of a second the awareness of an actual willed movement or a response to sensory stimulation. The cortical evoked potentials indicate that the brain is initiating or reacting to what is happening far sooner than the instantaneous perception we experience. On a physiological scale, this represents a huge discrepancy that our mind corrects by falsifying the actual time an action or event occurs, thus enabling our conscious experience to conform to what we perceive. But data even more damaging to our confidence in the reliability of our perceptions comes from studies of rapid eye movements called saccades that are triggered by novel visual stimuli. During the brief moments of these jerky eye movements, visual input to the brain is actively suppressed. We are literally blind. Without this involuntary ocular censorship, we would be repeatedly plagued with moments of acute blurred vision that would be unpleasant as well as unsafe. From a survival calculus, this would pose an extreme disadvantage, since it would invariably occur with novel stimuli, which by their very nature require not the worst, but the best visual acuity. The wizard's solution to this intolerable situation is to exclude those intervals from our stream of awareness and replace them instead with a vision extrapolated from what just occurred to what is immediately anticipated. Consciousness, like a former president, has to come up with an accounting for the erased period. Evolution provided a much longer epoch to work out the bugs in this necessary deception than the limited time frame under the gun of a special prosecutor. Instead of trying to hide the existence of the tape, a reference to Watergate, a conspiracy, consciousness came up with a far cleverer trick of obscuring the deletion. It does this by falsifying the time, backdating those necessary moments so that there is no appearance of any gap. The illusion of visual continuity from interference and extrapolation reveals an innate vulnerability in the brain software that any good hacker can exploit. Magicians, card sharks, 3-card Monty hustlers have made a nice living working out this perceptual flaw. In a comic routine, Richard Pryor expressed this best when caught by his wife with another woman. "Who are you going to believe? Me or your lying eyes?" I hate that I do that voice every time. I don't even know what he sounded like, really. Bro, you want to talk to me about conspiracies? Okay. First, let's talk about these bad boys. Because there's a lot of nefarious shit happening here. Alright, I gotta go. This guy might walk up to my vehicle.